shall we get on with introducing you to Lydia Burton. So Lydia is a grants manager at Henry Smith Charity and is going to tell us today about this new grant that they're launching for advocacy. So advocacy for people with learning disabilities and or autistic people. So we're really excited to have you, Lydia, and really pleased to be hearing about the grant. So just to let people on the call know, Lydia's going to take us through some slides and explain about Henry Smith Charity, explain about the grant, the application process and eligibility. And if you've got questions during that presentation, could you use the chat box and type them in, and I'll keep a track of what questions people are asking. So Lydia, that's going to be about a 25-minute presentation from Lydia, and then there'll be a good half an hour for everybody to be able to ask questions. Does that sound all okay? All right, Lydia, I shall hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Gail. Can I have my first slide, please?
You certainly can.
First of all, yes, big thank you to everyone for being here, and really exciting to finally have this grant programme out in the world and be able to share it with you. So I thought, first of all, I would just give a little bit of background to the Henry Smith Charity. I know we've got some people on the call who are familiar with us, either through currently having a grant or perhaps previously funded, but also some people who are maybe less familiar with the charity's work. So in a nutshell, the Henry Smith Charity is a large grant-making trust. It distributes over £30 million in grant funding each year to organisations working across the UK. And these grants are made through a range of programmes. There are some smaller programmes, for example, one that makes grants towards holidays for children from disadvantaged areas, and also a small programme making grants to individuals who are descended from Henry Smith's family and are experiencing hardship. However, the vast majority of our grants are made through our two main grants programmes, which are called Improving Lives and Strengthening Communities. Of these, Strengthening Communities is the smaller programme, and this funds mainly grassroots, smaller organisations working in areas of high deprivation and providing a range of activities and services for the community in those areas. So mainly through things like community hubs and youth centres and things like that. And then Improving Lives is the larger of the two. This is the one through which we make most of our grants. And this is for grants that are made to organisations supporting people experiencing a wide range of social and economic disadvantage. And through this programme, we fund organisations that are delivering more targeted work. So they're normally working with a particular community or people experiencing a particular need. And it's under Improving Lives that we do already fund some organisations working with people with learning disabilities and autistic people. And this does include some grants that fund work in the area of advocacy or self-advocacy support. And if for whatever reason you are not interested or not able to apply to the strategic programme we're talking about today, I would recommend that you perhaps take a look at Improving Lives, as that may still be of interest. So most of our grant making is reactive, but we are now proactively expanding our work in the area of advocacy through the launch of this new strategic programme. Can I have the next slide, please, Gail? Thank you. Oh, sorry, one too far. Perfect. Thank you, Gail. So how did we get to this point? So this new programme came about following what we call a sector review, which is where we carry out in-depth research into a particular area of our grant making. So in this case, the sector was learning disability and autism, and we consulted with a wide range of stakeholders and individuals who have experience in this area, including service delivery organisations, some of whom were current grant holders, some umbrella and infrastructure organisations, as well as third-party researchers working in this area. And our aim with this sector review process was to identify current trends and needs in the sector, as well as any areas where we felt that additional funding could be particularly valuable. So when looking into issues that were experienced by people with learning disabilities or autistic people, we looked into a wide range of issues that people might be experiencing. So this included things like housing, access to benefits, and life transitions. And consistently what we heard time and time again from across the sector, we heard about the positive impact that access to good quality, non-statutory independent advocacy can have across a wide range of situations and issues, through helping people to exercise choice and control and have their voices heard, which I'm sure won't come as a surprise to any of you. And at the same time, we also heard about the lack of funding for this work. For example, funding being diverted towards statutory requirements and funding for more general non-statutory advocacy diminished. And at a focus group that we held with some of our current grant holders, participants identified the lack of core funding available as a particular challenge felt in the sector. We also found during our research phase, the consensus amongst organisations seemed to be that although we are all very aware of the impact and the importance of this work, that the sector as a whole had not fully demonstrated and showcased its impact. And it was felt that a shared data set and evidence-based would help achieve this and potentially help organisations to leverage additional funding in future. So we hope that this new targeted programme will assist with both of these challenges. Can I have the next slide, please, Gail? Thank you. So just to give you an overview of the key headlines about the programme. So first of all, we have a total of £1.75 million available, and with this we anticipate making between 10 and 12 grants. So these grants will be within the range of £60,000 to £180,000 in total, and can be for up to 3 years. Within that, you can apply for a minimum of £20,000 and a maximum of £60,000 per year. But we would ask that your request per year does not exceed 50% of your annual running costs. We would expect organisations to apply for the full 3 years unless there's a good reason not to, and we would certainly encourage you not to be reticent in doing so. There's no advantage to applying for fewer years, so really do feel able to request the full 3. Similarly, we would really strongly encourage you to apply for the amount of funding that you need. I think sometimes there's some concern about appearing to be asking for too much, particularly if it's a funder that's new to you, or feeling that a lower request is more likely to be successful. And that's really not the case. We know that you know what you need, so we really encourage you to encourage for the amount that you do need. You can also apply for either project costs or running costs. With regards to project costs, again, I think sometimes there's a sense that it has to be a brand new project. That's not the case at all. We actually really value tried and tested work. And under this programme, we will very happily fund existing services. although we are also open to applications to expand or enhance existing provision. So examples of that might be going into a new geographic area, or supporting people for a longer period of time, or supporting a greater number of people through the funding. All grants will be made to service delivery organisations, so we wouldn't be making funding towards the work of second tier organisations or sector support organisations. It's very much focused on organisations who are delivering the advocacy themselves, and that is the focus of all applications. Similarly, grants will be made to single organisations only, so we won't be able to accept partnership bids, for example. It will be just applications from a single organisation. And finally, as well as the financial support provided through the grants, we'll also be working with a partner organisation who'll be working with grant holders, and this partner will carry out an evaluation of the funded work in order to help grant holders to best demonstrate their impact, as well as considering the impact of the programme as a whole. And the partner will also be convening a network of the grant holders and supporting them to work together to bring about change in their local areas, and potentially even nationally. Next slide, please, Gail. Thank you. So moving on to basic eligibility. So hopefully this slide is fairly self-explanatory. So in terms of size, we're looking at small to medium-sized organisations. So you'll need to have an income of between £50,000 and £3 million. We do primarily fund registered charities, but other not-for-profit entities are also able to apply. The most important thing is that you are not-for-profit. All applicants should be established organisations, and by this we mean registered for at least 18 months, and that you've produced at least your first set of annual accounts. On the question of reserves, we do stipulate that applicants should not be holding more than 12 months running costs in reserves. And the way we calculate this is looking at your net current assets plus any investments in your last accounts. This programme is not England specific, so you must be based and working in England, Wales, Scotland or Northern Ireland, and we do very much encourage applications from across the UK, but any organisation working further afield than that would not be able to apply. Unfortunately, if you do currently have an application pending under another Henry Smith grant programme, you are not able to apply to this programme. However, the good news is that if you do currently have a grant under another of our programmes, so that will likely be an Improving Lives grant, you can apply to this programme as well. So you can essentially have the two grants running at the same time. The same applies if you have been declined within the past 12 months for another Henry Smith programme. So if this is the case, you will have received a letter asking you to wait a year before reapplying. But as this is a strategic programme and slightly separate to our main grants, the usual rules don't apply and you are able to make an application. And finally, all applicants must have experience of delivering independent advocacy for people with learning disabilities or autistic people. Next slide, please, Gail. Thank you. So having covered the more basic eligibility criteria, I'm now going to talk in a bit more detail about the type of work that we're aiming to fund and what a good application might look like. When I talk about applications, I'm referring to two stages. So there's an expression of interest and then a second stage application. And I will speak in some more detail about this process later. So the first thing to say is we're not focusing on a specific model of advocacy. We are open to different models. So for example, that might include one-to-one advocacy, self-advocacy support, peer advocacy. This could be a more general service open to a wide range of people, or it could be a more specialist service, such as advocacy for parents with learning disabilities, or advocacy specifically for people of a certain nationality or a certain cultural background. The common thread is that we're really looking to provide support, to fund support that is longer term and flexible, and potentially assisting people with a range of different issues and at different life stages. We're looking for applicants who can evidence a track record of positive outcomes. And the key thing here is that whether you're delivering a one-to-one or a group model, you should be able to provide outcomes for individuals rather than for the group as a whole. This focus on the individual also means that we are specifically looking at advocates who are working with individuals who have learning disabilities or are autistic, rather than advocates working with people around those people. So, for example, advocacy for parents of people with learning disabilities is something we wouldn't fund under this programme. In terms of the outcomes, we are ideally looking for outcomes for both the short, medium and longer term. We do appreciate that that's not something you might necessarily be able to provide at the moment, but when thinking about future outcomes, we would hope that the funding would be able to assist in delivering this kind of longer term change. We're also looking to see that you are working towards the kind of outcomes that are usually associated with advocacy services, such as increased choice and control and access to rights and entitlements. I also want to add that when we're thinking about outcomes, questions on this topic will feature in both the expression of interest and the stage 2 application. So don't worry if you feel you can't kind of do justice to everything in the expression of interest, because at that stage we're really asking about what I've just described, the types of outcomes that you're working towards, and ensuring that those outcomes are relevant for an advocacy service. And it's then at stage 2 that organisations will be asked to provide evidence of outcomes that they've achieved in the past, and also to think about future outcomes that they would hope to achieve with this funding. And it's here that we'll hopefully be looking for that short, medium and longer term breadth of outcomes. We're also hopefully looking for applicants who can show a really good understanding of the need in their area and are able to clearly demonstrate that. So this includes things like the number of people in your local area who might need your service, and the challenges that are faced by that group. If you have your own data on this, that can be particularly useful. So this might include a survey you've carried out with your clients about their needs or the challenges they face. Anything that really brings that to life in their own words, and is kind of specific to your client group and the people you work with, rather than say broader national data, for example. It's also really helpful when thinking about need to tell us about other organisations and services in your local area and how you might be filling any gaps in current provision, or how what you are hoping to do would fill any gaps. When we're thinking about need, we obviously want to fund work and organisations that are very well placed to meet that need, So the description of the work is really important. And this is something you'll get the chance to include at both expression of interest and stage 2. At the expression of interest, it's a shorter summary, and then you can expand upon this at stage 2 and provide more detail, for example, on the content of sessions or perhaps a case study or something like that. But what's really useful for us at both stages is that you give a very clear sense of user journey. So what your service looks like for the people who are accessing it. And that would include things like referral pathways, the type or types of support available, and the typical length and frequency of engagement with your services. I think sometimes when you're asked to describe the work that you do, it can be tempted to think at quite a high level and think organisationally and strategically, or perhaps talk about the different tasks that different funded posts would carry out. But actually what we really want to see is just a very clear description of your services as they appear to the people who are accessing them. We're also very interested in how you're integrated into your community. And by this we mean both geographic communities and communities of interest. So in terms of geographic community, we're keen to hear about links you have with relevant organisations and stakeholders in your area. And this includes statutory services, for example, adult services or your local safeguarding board. And this could be formal partnerships, but it might also be information about more informal connections and positive working relationships that you have. This also includes the voluntary sector. So this might be links with other advocacy services. If you're working with a particular group, for example, older people or BAME communities, this might be through links with other relevant charities that support that group in different ways. As I said, as well as geography, we're thinking about communities of interest as well, and how people with lived experience are involved in what you do. And this might be people who are on your board or amongst your staff team or working as volunteers in your organisation, or it might be through co-production of services or use of feedback to improve service delivery. Really anything that shows that the voices of people with lived experience are integrated into what you do and are listened to. And then finally, we're really keen to fund organisations that are delivering what would widely be regarded as best practice advocacy. This is a key part of the expression of interest, and the help text on the form does include prompts for the kind of things that we would like you to include here. So this includes things like advocates receiving appropriate training, and perhaps holding an advocacy qualification. And then at an organisational level, it would be things like working to an established framework, such as the Advocacy Charter, or perhaps holding the Advocacy Quality Mark. And really what we're looking for here is for you to showcase your experience and expertise in this field. Can I have the next slide, please, Gail? So finally, onto the application process itself. So after all of that, if you feel that you would like to apply, this is a 3-stage application process. So as I mentioned, there are 2 stages to the written application, and then the final stage is a visit, or at the moment, a virtual visit. So the first stage is the expression of interest. This is live on our website now. So you are able to apply any time between now and Monday the 15th of November. And the deadline is 5 p.m. on that Monday. We will then be shortlisting applications and we'll invite those shortlisted to complete a 2nd stage application. And as I mentioned, this gives you a chance to provide more information on the work for which you're seeking funding, and also to answer those more detailed questions about your outcomes. NDCI will be assisting us in an advisory capacity, and I will just briefly hand back over to Gail to say a little bit about that.
Oh, my computer's really not happy with me doing more than one thing at a time. Has your presentation gone all funny again now?
It looks fine, actually. Would you like to do this bit at the end?
No, it's fine. It's fine. So yes, just to say, so NDTI, we've been working alongside Henry Smith Charity and Lydia and her colleagues in kind of thinking about and shaping what they want to achieve through this grant, and kind of just answering questions about advocacy, and thinking about some of those technical things. And obviously through the advocacy programme and the QPM, we get to hear all sorts of interesting issues and challenges, and as well as the amazing things that advocacy organisations are achieving. So we've been assisting in that capacity as a kind of supporting advisory capacity, but we're not going to be involved in making decisions about which organisations get grants. So we just want to be really clear in terms of our role there, and thinking, you know, we don't want there to be any conflicts of interest. So Lydia and the team might come and ask us a particular question, but we won't be seeing anybody's grants. We won't know who's applied. We're not going to be involved in the making of the decisions. So, okay, I can see Drew's telling me it's all gone wrong on the screen. So I'm going to see if I can get that back. All right.
Thank you, Gail. Well, we're very nearly finished with that final slide anyway. So, as I said, it will be a two-stage written application process, and then the final stage. Oh, that's gone back to normal. Thank you, Gail. The final stage is similar to our main grants programmes. We like to visit organisations to meet applicants in person, and hear more about the work and potentially see where you are delivering the work. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, these in-person visits have been suspended, and have been carried out virtually via video meetings, and we anticipate that this will remain the case for this programme. So these video visits will be carried out in the new year. And finally, successful applicants will be informed in March 2022, and will be expected to begin delivery within 6 months. So that brings us to the end of this stage of the session. So as Gail said, we've got some time for Q&A. If you'd rather go away and have a think and have a read through the information on our website and then have any questions, please do feel free to get in touch after the session. In the guidelines, there's an email address that you can contact, and then a member of the team will get in touch with you to discuss any questions that you might have. So I'll now hand back over to Gail to start the Q&A part of the session.
So there weren't any questions in the chat, but Sharad, you've got your hand up. Do you want to go? Just to say, we'll keep a note of the questions and we'll share a kind of typed up version of the answers so that those can be made available after the session as well. Sorry, Sharon, over to you.
Thanks, Gail. Thanks, it's really interesting and helped a lot, additionally with the information as well. The one thing I wanted to clarify is that about if an application has already been made to Henry Smith by an organisation, so I've been having this conversation because we have a communities side of our service as well, and we believe the communities team have applied for some funding from Henry Smith to do some work. So it's not the advocacy side, it's the community side. Would that then nullify us from being able to make an application from the advocacy side of the service? We are in the same service, but we're distinctly separate sides of the service, if you like.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So when you say the same service, you're still part of the same organisation and
Yes,
the
so it's
same
still
entity.
Your Voice Counts. So Your Voice Counts has an advocacy service, which is sort of separate and distinct, and then a communities service, which is separate and distinct.
Okay, so unfortunately, in your case, we would view the organisation as one whole, and if an application is pending for one side of your work, that would mean that you wouldn't be able to apply, I'm afraid.
And if they were refused for any reason, would that mean that that one application still counted, or would we then be able to think, because I think they're going to be hearing soon. I'm edging my bets here, Lydia. It's kind of like, if they find out they're unsuccessful, would that leave an opening then for us to go forward with an expression of interest?
Yes, it would. So
not that I'm going to wish any ill will whatsoever, because I'm not.
Of course. So yes, that would mean if they do hear before the expression of interest window closes and they have been unsuccessful, then you would be able to apply, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And I think the next person was Emily.
Hi, thanks, Gail. I've got a couple of questions actually. One was just about the outcomes for individuals. So you've talked about being interested in the outcomes, the impact and outcomes for individuals rather than the outcomes for a group. But I'm just thinking in terms of self-advocacy, the self-advocacy groups that we support wouldn't be supporting individuals to address specific issues or problems that they've got themselves. They might get referred on to a one-to-one advocacy programme support from an individual advocate, but the group would be working around shared issues and trying to sort of have some impact around influencing change in local organisations or policies or those kind of things. Are you not looking at those outcomes as well?
So we would be looking at those outcomes, but I think we would ideally also want to see evidence of positive change for those individuals, whether that is people being referred and then going on to work with an individual advocate, or other types of positive change that were gained through their participation in that group. So whether that's individuals reporting increased confidence or increased understanding of local issues or increased social connections. So something from the individual side as well as those system changes in the area.
Okay, thanks, that makes sense. Can I ask another question, just following on from that? Just in terms of qualifications, so advocates who are providing one-to-one advocacy would have the national qualification, but there isn't currently, as far as I'm aware, a qualification around self-advocacy for facilitators, so they wouldn't necessarily have the individual advocate qualification. Does that matter? Is there, Gail, have you got a response to that in terms of qualifications around self-advocacy?
No, Emily, you're right. There isn't anything, is there, at the moment? So it really is thinking about the qualifications for that one-to-one advocacy delivery.
Okay, brilliant. Can I ask a really quick last question? Is that right? Or do you want to move on?
Of course.
Okay, it's about core funding. So I know in your previously when we've applied to your one of your programs, we've been, for a project, we've been allowed to include up to 20% core funding associated with that project, or we could apply for just core funding across the whole organisation. Is there a sort of cap on that in this regard? Can we apply for a mixture of core and project funding, or is it that it has to be either project or core? Does that make sense?
That does make sense. So it's very similar to our existing grant programs. It is largely either or. So it would either be a core costs application or project costs, but as you say, with a reasonable amount of core costs included under full cost recovery. So like you say, Emily, around 20% would feel reasonable for that.
Okay, thanks very much.
William, did that answer your question? So William's asked in the chat, Lydia, just to be clear, we can submit either an application for project funding or core funding, or can we mix the two?
Yeah,
project funding, what percent?
That just answered it completely.
Brilliant.
So thanks.
All right. So Margaret, I can see your hand up. Yes. I'll try and get to everybody, and I'll keep a track of what the questions in the chat as well.
Thank you. I just wanted to explore the issue of being able to apply for current work as well as new projects, and whether or not, I mean, my thinking is that we would be applying for funding for a post, but the post might not be dedicated to one specific project. So there might be some ongoing work that we would like to have funding for into the future, but there might also be an expansion of that or development of that which we couldn't do without funding. And could we apply for a project that has 2 or 3 arms to it? Some of it is ongoing, currently proven work that's effective, and some is our development of that based on our experience of doing what we're doing currently. Would that make a plan?
Yes, I think the short answer is yes. I think it might be good to follow up perhaps afterwards and have a more in-depth conversation about what it is that you'd be proposing. But I think the short answer is yes. A project could be a post that spans several strands.
Okay.
As a kind of general rule of thumb, when we're thinking about posts, if it was for example, most of the funding would be going towards the salary of your CEO or your administrator. That would be a running costs application. Yeah. And then if the post is more service delivery, which it sounds like yours would be, then that would be project costs. But as I said, it might be good for us to pick that one up afterwards as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
And Amanda in the chat, I think it's possibly a similar question, had asked Lydia, is it possible to do a sort of bits and pieces type approach? So her question is, would you prefer a bid for one type of advocacy, or can we submit one with a bits and pieces approach, for example, one-to-one and self-advocacy?
So yes, bits and pieces would be absolutely fine. And again, I think, to be honest with you, sometimes the boundary between running costs and project costs can be quite flexible. So it might be that your bits and pieces are pretty much everything, all of the types of advocacy that you're doing, in which case it would be more of a running cost bid, but you could parcel up a few strands and encompass everything that you were doing, and that could certainly include a combination of one-to-one and self-advocacy.
Great. And Julie? Julie, you're on mute still.
Okay, sorry. I just want a bit more clarification around reserves and everything, please, because within our we've got some funding within our reserves which covers staff redundancy and also closing of the organisation, and then we've got an account down for our running costs as well. So would the reserves be included in like the 12 months running costs? Does that make sense?
That does make sense, and yes, the way that we do this calculation, and this is across all of our programmes, and this is just the way our trustees have chosen to do it, is we are looking at everything that you're holding under your net current assets. So that might include things that are designated or restricted. For our purposes, we would still include that.
Okay, thank you.
I'm muted now. Drew had said that Caroline was putting her hand up manually. So Caroline, did you have a question? And you're on mute. Do you need me to unmute you? if I can. Bear with me. Shall we, Caroline, while I do that, Wendy, do you want to ask your question? And then Caroline, I'll unmute you in a moment while I work it out.
Can I just say thank you, because this is so needed, especially in the next stage where we all know that we're going to be facing further cutbacks when people really need it. It's needed for learning disabilities and for autism. I just wondered, autism often gets lumped in with learning disabilities, but the majority of autistic people don't have learning disabilities. Would it be okay if we were applying for a bid on this that was specific to autism?
Yes, absolutely. That's certainly something you'd be very welcome to do. And that's the reason for the slightly clunky and/or in the programme title. So as you say, we're well aware that lots of autistic people don't necessarily have a learning disability, and you could certainly apply for work with that group.
Thank you.
I can't see now. Who else has got their hand up? Dawn. Caroline, I haven't forgotten you. I'm trying to work it out.
Hi. We're funded by a local authority to provide a self-advocacy service. So I just wondered whether that had inhibit us for applying, because we're a national organisation, so it might be that we could apply for a separate project in a different area or do a standalone project with the self-advocates that we currently work with.
I don't think that would be a problem. I think although we are saying we won't fund statutory advocacy, when we say that, we're kind of referring to the narrow definition of what statutory provision looks like. But if it happens that you have local authority funding for other elements of your work that don't fall under that umbrella, you could apply for funding to supplement that work, or for funding for other work in that area or another area.
Brilliant, thank you.
And Alan. Alan Herbert. We can't hear you, Alan. Perhaps you've moved away from the computer. Caroline, are you able to unmute yourself? Do you know? Trying. I can't work out how to do it. I'm sorry about that. Was there anybody else with their hand up?
Me.
Go for it.
Okay, so I want to ask about the qualifications. If experience can be like demonstrated, so putting that aside for a minute, do the qualifications have to already be in place, or can, for example, getting autistic advocates qualified through training and certification be part of that project, the initial stage perhaps? I really believe, as an autistic person myself, that the multi-level outcomes of that would add value to the social impact, especially when considering the limitations on us in accessing education and professional roles. We have an entirely autistic complement of staff here at Aubergine Cafe, by the way, and we can offer quite a unique perspective. I'm an experienced advocate, both a professional advocate and independent advocate, and I'm also qualified for advice and guidance. We were thinking about perhaps workplace advocacy combined with advice and guidance for the particular employer, and we, as employers of autistic people and as autistic people ourselves, I think we have like a really unique perspective. Like, yeah, that's all I'll say for now. But yeah, so I guess the question is about, do the qualifications already have to be in place, or can training and qualifying autistic people be part of the project?
Sure, thank you. It's a great question, and I think first thing to say is the qualifications don't have to be in place already, and I think more broadly on the question of qualifications, in the application we say it's something that's a nice to have, and if it's something that you do, please say. But as Emily's pointed out, it won't be appropriate for everybody, so it's not an absolute must. And with regards to your specific question, Selina, I think certainly that would be something that would be eligible, a bid towards supporting autistic advocates, or supporting autistic people to train and qualify as advocates. That would certainly be something that we could consider. I think similar to Margaret's question, it might be useful to have a follow-up conversation and talk through that in more detail with you, if that would be of interest.
And you mean prior to making an expression of interest?
Yes.
Okay, and I just have a follow-up on that. I know that you said you won't be accepting partnership applications, but would that prevent us contracting a fellow autistic run like partner organisation, like contracting like perhaps one or two of the staff on secondment, for example, or another way?
I think in theory that would probably be okay if it was a small proportion of the work, but I would probably...
And if it can be explained.
Yeah, exactly, if there's a clear rationale for doing so. But again, I think it might be good for us to talk through that in more detail before you submit your expression of interest.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm just, Selina, there was a message from somebody else in the chat for you, just so that you can see it, if you can have a look in the chat. Caroline, thanks for managing to get your question. Selina. Can
I just say, sorry, I'm not able to write in the chat. It says I'm not. So.
Okay, so Wendy Cork from Ames Advonet has said it would be good to find out about your project. Okay. And their staff are autistic.
Okay.
Caroline's question.
Sorry, if you just Google Aubergine Cafe Cardiff, you'll find our website and all my contacts. Okay, that's it now.
Thanks, Selina. Caroline's question, Lydia, was, will the funding include people with learning disabilities and autism who lack capacity, or will those people fit into statutory advocacy under IMCA or under mental capacity? Have I got that right, Caroline? You give me, yeah.
I think it might actually be good to get your thoughts on that one, Gail.
So I think the projects could absolutely include people with learning disabilities and autistic people who lack capacity or might lack capacity in some areas of their life. This isn't about, it's not replacing any statutory advocacy, is it, Lydia? It's about expanding the types of advocacy that an organisation can provide. So if you know that there are people who might lack capacity in some areas of their life in decision making, who want and need some advocacy support, and you think a project could meet those needs, then I think that would be fine for you to apply. Is that right, Lydia? Have I got that right?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Gail. I think that's a really nice way of putting it. It's really about expanding the number of people who can benefit from advocacy services, and if you're aware of a group that would fit that bill, then absolutely.
I can see Ian's hand up.
Yeah. Lydia, can I ask a question around the statutory, non-statutory split, please, if I may? We currently have a contract through the Health and Social Care Partnership where the commissioned work is statutory and non-statutory, but the provision of statutory advocacy is prioritised. So where there are issues around capacity within the contract, we can only provide statutory work through the Mental Health Care and Treatment AWI and Adults with Incapacity. As such, we've been able only to provide that in the last 2 years. So we haven't been able to provide non-statutory work for individuals who would normally meet the criteria. Would that be problematic? Would that be a red line in relation to an application to provide non-statutory work to individuals who would normally meet that criteria, but we can't do it at the moment?
No, I think that would be fine. And you say you've not been able to do it for the past couple of years, but so presumably you do have experience prior to that.
We have a huge amount of experience, yes, and very frustrated by the fact that we can't provide that. It's predominantly self-referral stuff, but increasingly challenging to try and provide it in the current circumstances. So that's good news if it fits. It fits the model.
Yeah, that would be absolutely fine, and I think that's the kind of gap that we would like to fill if we can.
Lovely, thank you so much.
Is Alan Herbert back with us? Alan, if you're there and can unmute yourself to ask your question, then do. If not, Sue Cottrell, do you want to ask your question?
Hi, yes, thank you. I just wanted to check that the work our team do does kind of qualify as being advocates or advocacy in the sense that you're wanting it for this project. Could you point me in the direction of like a description of, you know, advocacy as it's meant for this project, to make sure, because I'm just weighing up whether we are appropriate for this scheme or whether we ought to be looking more at the Improving Lives programme. We provide, I mean, we call it support and advice and advocacy for people with a set of particular rare genetic conditions. We also do it throughout the UK, so I was just also going to check that that was okay as a community of interest rather than a local geographic community. And I know that our team do things like training on the Mental Capacity Act, and they work in areas like safeguarding and deprivation of liberty and so on. And they're starting to move more into representing the interests of our people with support in those ways. But I just wanted to be sure that we are correct advocacy as you mean it, because I know that currently we haven't got people who are accredited and so on with, you know, advocacy training. So so I just wanted to check that.
Sure, it's a really good question, and I think if you do decide on balance that this isn't the right programme, I think it sounds like Improving Lives would be a good bet as well. I'm not sure we have anything in writing specifically for this programme, although I'm sure I could find some resources to send you afterwards. I think really the key thing is that we're looking for advocacy as separate to, say, befriending or peer support or a straight information and advice service. So it's really about empowering people to speak up for themselves and helping people to bring about the change that they want to bring about, rather than doing things for them or speaking for them. Gail, would you like to add anything on that?
So I think Henry Smith have been really clear about wanting to fund advocacy as opposed to information and advice giving, and that advocacy or support to self-advocates within kind of groups is really focused on the principles of independent advocacy. So the principles that you would see in the Advocacy Charter, for instance, as a way of defining advocacy.
Okay, so
look
at the Advocacy Charter. Okay.
So look to the Advocacy Charter. We know that the principles apply. You know, the Charter was written with one-to-one advocacy in mind, more than group advocacy. But those principles around independence and being person-led and empowering, all of those principles apply in practice when supporting groups, I think, as well. So that's probably a good rule of thumb.
Thank you.
I can just see. So we will send out the links to the recording and we'll type up the questions. I have put in the chat the link to Henry Smith's charity, to the funding guidelines, and in that is the email address. So if you've got questions and you want to get in touch with Lydia and the team at Henry Smith because you want to talk through your ideas a bit more, then it's administration@henrysmithcharity.org.uk, and I've popped that in the chat as well. Lydia, there are a few more questions. Are you all right for time? Do you need to get off, or do you want to have a look at these other questions? I don't know, Emily Barrett, if you're still here, but you'd had a question about while we can't bid in partnership, are you interested in how projects might link with other similar projects to strengthen the work, share good practice, etc.?
Yes, that's a really good question, and the answer is absolutely yes. We're really interested in those relationships that you have and how the work might inform or feed into work that other organisations are delivering.
And Jean has a question. We support parents with learning disabilities who need an advocate in child protection meetings and family court, but often we are only asked to advocate when the case comes to family court. This means that the family has struggled prior to our involvement, but we don't have the funding to support earlier. Am I right in thinking that we can apply for funding so we can offer an advocacy service prior to being commissioned by the local authority?
Yes, you are quite correct. You would certainly be able to apply for that, and it would be really good in the application to have a really clear description of kind of how you're currently commissioned and the gap that you're filling, and also it would be really good to have positive outcomes of the work that you have already been able to deliver, with the understanding that the future outcomes might be a bit different if you are able to get involved earlier.
Margaret, you had your hands up again.
I have. It's a technical question, really, Gail. I can't access the chat. So, yeah.
So in the invite to the session,
right.
There were some attachments, and those are the attachments that I have. So those were the funding guidelines. In that funding guidelines are the contact details for Lydia.
Okay.
But when we can send out a note letting people know how to get in touch with you, Lydia, can't we?
Okay. No, that's fine. That's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Any last queries?
Can I just say one thing?
It's
Margaret again. I mean, I just wanted to say to Lydia and to Henry Smith, you know, we at Vocal have been involved in advocacy for 23 years. And at one stage, it was the flavour of the month for funders. And then it just fell off the plot completely. And okay, local authorities are obliged now to buy in advocacy, but they control how much money they're prepared to spend and how they define accessing that advocacy. Most advocacy organisations are aware of huge need, and it's fantastic that Henry Smith have taken the challenge and are prepared to put some money in. I'm sorry, it's making me quite tearful because we've waited a long time.
Thank
It's really
you so
important,
much, Margaret. That's really good to hear, and it's so lovely to have such a warm reception to the programme, and I'm so pleased to hear that and really excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you summed it up, Margaret. We know how much we need, particularly resources for non-statutory advocacy. We know somebody was talking earlier about, how advocacy for autistic people. There's so few projects out there, and those that there are that we know about make such an amazing difference to people's lives. And I think kind of just that, knowing that, that kind of resource is there, funding is there for what you need to be and want to be delivering, and what people want you to be supporting them with, rather than, I just remember being an advocate, managing an advocacy project and trying to squeeze my project to fit whatever, the criteria was, reinventing what we did. So yes, I think it's really valuable. There was one other technical question, Lydia, about the threshold for income. I think somebody had said, is it 3 million?
Yes, that's correct, 3 million.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, thank you ever so much, everybody, for coming. Thanks, Lydia, for your presentation. Lots of feedback in the chat with people saying thank you, and thank you for being so clear. So that's fantastic. All right, everybody, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week, and catch up with you all soon, I hope.
Good luck with your
good luck with your bids.
Thank you.